Okay, this is a reaction video for Lawrence and Lost in the Pond. Three ways British and American winters are very different. Well, it's August right now, but winter's on its way, and I'm kind of curious. Three ways British and American winters are very different. Let's find out.
Well, now, I can't quite remember, but it's very possible that I've talked about British and American winters before. But when I talk about American winters, I very often focus on those of the Midwest, because that's where I live. But I was reading the other day that America has places outside of Illinois, and in that moment it occurred to me that
yeah, it's hard to believe, but there are places in the United States outside of Illinois, and they have different takes on winter.
the winters that I endure here in Chicago are not in fact the reality for millions of Americans. This is a massive country. How big? About the size of 40 UKs. And so,
Yeah, we are much bigger than the UK, that's for sure.
of course, it stands to reason that with all of that latitude, there's just going to be a greater variety of winter weather across the entire country.
This is why three ways British and American winters are very different. But one way I think they're very much alike, and I don't think very many people like winters. I mean, unless you live in Florida where you don't have to worry about winter so much. But yeah.
And because I may have given a false impression to my British viewers that the whole of America is one big tundra, I wanted to look at that variety and how it compares with Britain. You know, I've lived in the north of England, I've lived in the south of England, I've lived in Indiana, and I've lived in Illinois. And in each of those cases, there's a favourite pastime among the people at the very moment that we change the clocks ahead of the looming winter. And that's when people say, "Ooh, I can't believe how early it gets dark these days."
When you turn the clocks back, it tends to do that.
That was my best impression of a Hoosier. And something I've learned between living in all of those places is that it all comes down to perspective. What do I mean by that? Well, everybody is saying the same thing, and yet from place to place there are wild differences in when the sun actually sets. To see what I mean by this, let's take a look at the shortest day of last year, December 21st. On December 21st, the Orkney Islands off the north coast of Scotland experienced a sunset at Austin 3:16 p.m. But even for me growing up in England, that's extreme.
Look, when I was in Germany, I was not prepared for the sun coming up at like 4:30 in the morning, and the sun going down at around 10 o'clock at night. I think is when it would sunset, maybe a little bit earlier than that, but around then. Because in the United States, it's a little bit different because of where you are located. But yeah.
As far as the United Kingdom goes, the Orkney Islands are far north. But even so, in my hometown of Grimsby, it would get dark about 40 minutes earlier than it does here in Chicago. And then, of course, you have the east to west difference. So, for example, in the southwest of Britain, the sun sets about half an hour later than it does in Dover in the southeast. Luckily, that kind of thing is relatively easy to follow in Britain because it's all on one time zone. The United States, meanwhile, operates on 6. And this has been very confusing for me because I've lived at the eastern side of the central time zone and the western side of the eastern time zone. And so on December 21st in Chicago, the sun completely set at 4:23. But in Indianapolis, where I previously lived, it set at 5:23.
Yeah, if you're in Indiana, close to the west of Indiana, you're right between the central and eastern. So you could literally be 5:23, go to the next town, and that'd be 4:23. And you're like, and yeah, you just have to deal with it. But fortunately, I'm in the Eastern Standard Time, and I don't intend to move any closer to Central Time.
And you might be thinking, well, that makes sense. For every time zone from west to east, you add on an hour. But when it comes to sunsets and science, it's not that easy. If it was, Philadelphia wouldn't have got dark at 4:39. And this can be found across 6 different time zones. So if you're the sort of person who's looking to move to America, but you hate it when it gets dark early, pro tip, move to the westernmost point of any time zone. Of course, there are major caveats to that. If you're one of the millions of people who's got your heart set on the tropical paradise that is Barrow, Alaska, you might be interested to learn about its December 21st sunset. It didn't have one. The town has been enveloped in darkness since my birthday. That was 2 months ago. Of course, much of Alaska is also an incredibly cold place. But
I've been to Alaska, and I've said what they told me, there's 2 seasons in Alaska. There's July and everything else. And so, yeah, Alaska, you're going to have problems there.
not everywhere can say the same thing. You know, when I was younger, I couldn't really imagine saying this, but I sort of miss British winters. By Chicago standards, they're not that bad.
And not that I minded it, because I enjoyed Alaska the week I was there.
Let's take the month of January as our example. Some of the lowest temperature averages you'll find in Britain are in the Scottish Highlands. And in the Scottish Highlands, in the month of January, it probably averages about -1 degrees Celsius. For completists and my American audience, that's about 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Of course, as with all of these averages, it can be colder or warmer on given days, but that's the January average. Down in Cornwall, in the southwest of England, you're looking at about 43 degrees Fahrenheit. And so in January, Britain, on the whole, averages between those two numbers. But in America, just like the land itself, those temperature ranges are so much bigger. So in Chicago, the January average is about 25 degrees, and for my British viewers, that's roughly -4 Celsius. And Chicago, cold though it is by no means the coldest place in the US. In Minneapolis,
Yeah, you got to go a little bit farther north to get to the real cold place, Minneapolis and St. Paul.
they average about 12 degrees, which is -11 Celsius. In Bismarck, North Dakota, it's 9 degrees Fahrenheit, or roughly -13 degrees Celsius. And then this one is just stupid. In Fairbanks, Alaska, the average in January is -11 degrees Fahrenheit, or -24 Celsius.
Yeah, I mean, in Alaska, he says 6 time zones. The only thing that the United States, it's mainly in the United States, it's Eastern, Central, Mountain, and Pacific. But then Alaska has its own time zone, and then Hawaii has its own time zone. I'm assuming we're not going to be talking about winter in Hawaii.
And those are the places, as I like to say, that are unfit for humans. But what if I told you there were parts of America that require not thick, heavy coats and stupid winter hats?
Yeah, he's talking about the South, in Florida or Hawaii.
But just a jumper and or sweater.
And Southern California, too.
And some pants of some kind. I'm not suggesting people walk around in their underwear. Well, this is the reality in parts of Southern California, Southwest Arizona, South Texas, and New Orleans. And in all of those places, I imagine there are times when people can get away with just wearing a t-shirt. And again, pants as well.
I have been out to California in February, end of January, early February, when it was like, 20 degrees in Columbus, Ohio, where I am from. And it was like, 75, 80 degrees out there.
And in Miami, I almost guarantee it, because there they average January temperatures of 69 degrees. And to be clear, that is in Fahrenheit, otherwise it would look like the beginning of Terminator 2. In Celsius, that's over 20 degrees. In January, as an average.
That's why people go on vacation there in January.
And so sometimes it'll go above that and people presumably head to the beaches. And while I'm on the verge of getting envious, I just then remember I don't like people. So the winter beaches here in Chicago are more my style. I don't have style. And
well, have the time of your life, pal.
Crazily, that's not even the warmest average. In Honolulu, you're looking at
I mentioned Hawaii, and here's Hawaii.
73 degrees. So where might you find British-like winter temperatures? Well, as ever, you're likely to encounter those in the coastal areas of the Pacific Northwest, but also in a vast part of the country that's sort of south of the Midwest. But
yeah, if you look at this map here, anything above the quote-unquote Mason-Dixon line, you're definitely going to get cold temperatures like you have in Britain. Maybe a little bit to the south, like Atlanta, and places like that. Certainly not in Florida, but certainly in New York, certainly in Washington, D.C., Chicago, Columbus, Ohio, Philadelphia, Buffalo.
But north of the Deep South, basically the northern South, that made way more sense in my head. In other words, if you're looking for those same temperature ranges that we saw with the Scottish Highlands and Cornwall, then a decent comparison would be New York City, where it's 32 degrees, down to Atlanta, where it's 43. Oh, and speaking of Atlanta, that brings us on to this. One of the most prominent features of winter, of course, is snow, and you might be thinking, what relationship does Atlanta have with snow? More on that in a minute. But Britain, where I'm from, does get snow. Usually, and disappointingly, not quite enough snow to make a snowman, though there have definitely been exceptions over the years, especially in Scotland, where they see more than the UK.
Yeah, you don't see, when I watch English football, you generally don't see a whole lot of games called off because of snow in January and February. Now, I have seen situations where there was snow or snow packed to the side off the pitch, but you don't see a whole lot of games called off for snow.
The average But for the most part, it doesn't often get bad enough that you'll see somebody wearing this. Of course, in Chicago, where it snowed in fact today, it's absolutely crucial. But there are some places in the US, including upstate New York, that get even more snow than Chicago.
Oh, no kidding. They get more. And hell, go up to Cleveland, get the lake effect. They get a hell of a lot more snow up there than they do down in Columbus, where I'm at. We have a very mild winters for the most part. We have snows which we get 5 or 6 inches or something like that. Yeah, the most we've had are 5 or 6 inches where I'm from. But if you're up in Cleveland, you get a hell of a lot more.
And don't just take my word for it. Here's me from 2 years ago. But funnily enough, New York City and just sort of downstate New York in general doesn't actually get snow on the level that you see in the rest of the northeast of the United States that we touched on here in this very video. The heavy load is actually carried by upstate New York. It gets a ton of snow, and it's all down to lake effect weather. So the likes of Buffalo and Rochester, they get nearly 100 inches of snow. That is mental, but it's not as mental as the city of Syracuse, which gets 123.8 inches a year on average. That's mental. It's also, for that reason, the snowiest city in the lower 48 of the United States.
We did have one thing back in the South, I remember, where there was a big snowstorm, and you had a bunch of people who didn't know how to drive in snowstorms because they never experienced it before. So they're out there in their cars driving 50 or 60 like they normally would, and needless to say, they were on the side of the road needing assistance because they didn't understand that you don't drive like a bat out of hell in snow.
And I know what you're thinking, how dare you, sir, accuse Syracuse of being the worst? You didn't think that. I just like wordplay. Indeed, in that video where inexplicably I speak really fast and with a posher accent, I cover 6 other states that get way more snow than Britain. I'll link to that one at the end. But once you get south of the Mason-Dixon line, snow becomes more of a rarity. So Atlanta, which doesn't typically see a lot of snow and because of that isn't as prepared for it as, say, Chicago, closed schools and declared a state of emergency.
I lived in South Carolina for a couple years. And effectively, we got snow flurries, not snow flurries. And they called school off for that. Snow flurries don't even accumulate. They were snow, looked like snow, call it off. One time when the snow actually did show up on the ground, my class actually stopped school, stopped teaching. We all got up, got on our coats, and walked around so we could see what snow looked like because it's such a rarity there. I don't know if it's changed, but yeah, wouldn't surprise me if they declare a state of emergency because of the snowstorm. This is probably what I was talking about. I don't know what this was, but they had snowstorms and people didn't know how to drive in it.
See, amid 4 inches of snow and temperatures that were in the 20s.
Yeah, 4 inches of snow is not it's important to care about, but it's not a big deal. It's not like, oh my God, 4 inches of snow. What are we going to do? That's just a snowfall. But but down there it would probably be a nightmare.
Remember, temperatures like that are extremely low for Atlanta, which in January on average is about 15 to 20 degrees warmer than Chicago, but it ain't got nothing on Miami, where snow is incredibly rare. Miami has issued 0 reports of snow flurries since 1977. Star Wars hadn't come out yet, Charlie Chaplin was still alive, and John Cena wasn't yet. Other honorable mentions among the low snow brigade include the Deep South, Southwest Arizona, and the West Coast. Other than that, America is pretty snowy, so wrap up warm and get yourself a shovel. That's it for this episode. Let me know in the comments below your winter weather. I'm Lawrence Brown. You can follow me on Twitter at LostInThePondUS, and do not forget to subscribe to my channel so that these videos don't get lost in the pond. And today, become one of my 370 plus patrons to make this channel even better. To do that, good.
My cousin is from Southern California. She came out to Northern Ohio and Cleveland, never experienced snow or ice, and was driving like a bat out of hell and sliding all over the road. Thought it was the most fun she ever had in the car. Now, she didn't get into an accident. She made it to her destination fine. That was all good and well, but we had to tell her, no, you don't do that when you land in snow, okay, or snow or ice. But that's the other thing he's not mentioning, is that you also have ice on the road, which can be absolutely hazardous. Either way, he talked more about United States winters, which I knew about more than he did in England, which I was kind of hoping you'd talk more about. But it is what it is. Thank you, Lawrence. Please click like, share, and subscribe for him. Please click like, share, and subscribe for me. And thanks for watching, and have a good rest of your day. Thank you.